During the invasion of the Afghan tribes, as well as the armies of the Ottoman and Russian empires, Tahmasp II almost lost his state, but luck smiled at him. In 1726, Tahmasp II had a new ally in the person of Nader Afshar, who turned out to be a very talented commander, due to which some modern historians call him the Napoleon of the East. Thanks to the talent of a commander, Nader Afshar managed to oust the Afghans from the territory of the Safavid state and return the throne to Tahmasp II. It should be mentioned that Tahmasp II, like his father, was a very weak ruler. For this very reason, Nader Afshar was involved in almost all military and state affairs. After the Afghans were forced out, about half of the territory of the Safavid state was under the control of the Russian and Ottoman empires, so Nader Afshar decided to return them. First of all, the Safavid state needed to regain control over western Iran, which was under the rule of the Ottoman Sultan. Due to the fact that after the expulsion of the Afghans, the rulers of all the eastern regions of Iran recognized the authority of Tahmasp II, Nader Afshar managed to gather a large army and on March 9, 1730, began a campaign against the Ottoman Empire. The Safavid army advanced from Shiraz and quickly reached the fortress of Nahavand, catching the local Ottoman garrison by surprise. The Ottomans could not withstand the onslaught of the enemy and hastily retreated to the vicinity of Hamadan, where they regrouped and planned to stop the onslaught of the Safavid army. The battle took place in the valley of the Malaya River. As a result of the bloody battle, the Ottoman army was defeated. Having won a victory, Nader Afshar occupied the city of Hamadan and, taking advantage of the absence of large enemy forces in the region, continued to oust the Ottomans from the territory of the Safavid state. Already on August 12, 1730, the army of Nader Afshar managed to establish control over the city of Tabriz and almost all the western provinces of the Safavid state. Nader Afshar planned to continue the offensive in order to liberate the Safavid possessions in the Caucasus from the Ottomans, but he could not put these plans into practice. The fact is that the uprising was raised by the Afghan tribe of Abdali, who began to ravage Khorasan and besieged the city of Mashhad. In this situation, Nader Afshar was forced to deploy his army to the east in order to protect Khorasan from the Afghans. It should be mentioned that the victories over the Afghan and Ottoman armies significantly raised the authority of Nader Afshar among the population of the Safavid state. In turn, Tahmasp II and his inner circle did not like the rise of Nader Afshar. To remedy the situation, Tahmasp II decided to gain the glory of a successful commander himself and thereby strengthen his power in the state. While Nader Afshar, along with the main army, was engaged in suppressing the uprising of the Afghans, Tahmasp II gathered an 18,000th army, consisting of recruits, with the help of which he planned to regain control of the Caucasus. The army of the Safavids with a swift march reached the city of Yerevan and laid siege to it. This time, the Ottomans were ready to attack and quickly responded to the invasion. The Ottoman army under the command of Hekimoglu Ali Pasha cut off the supply lines of the army of Tahmasp II, who in this situation was forced to stop the siege of Yerevan and retreat to Tabriz. At the same time, the Second Ottoman Army under the command of Ahmad Pasha also invaded the territory of the Safavid state. The battle between the two Ottoman armies and the army of Tahmasp II took place in the vicinity of Tabriz. The Safavid army, which consisted of recruits, was quickly put to flight, and the cities of Tabriz, Hamadan and Kermanshah fell into the hands of the Ottomans. So Tahmasp II was forced to make peace with the Ottoman Empire and recognized the authority of the Ottoman Sultan over the Caucasus in exchange for the return of Tabriz, Hamadan and Kermanshah. Meanwhile, Nader Afshar returned from the campaign, who, having learned about the agreement signed with the Ottoman Empire, forced Tahmasp II to abdicate in favor of the minor Abbas III. From that moment on, Nader Afshar was in the hands of all power, since the new Shahinshah, due to his age, was not able to deal with public affairs. Nader Afshar, despite the peace treaty signed by Tahmasp II with the Ottomans, planned to regain control of the Caucasus, so he began hastily preparing for a new war. Nader Afshar turned out to be not only a successful military leader, but also a rather experienced politician. He was well aware that due to the lack of a waterway to India, control over the coast of the Caspian Sea did not provide the Russian Empire with the income that it had originally expected. Therefore, Nader Afshar began negotiations with the Russian Empire. Since the Safavid state and the Russian Empire had a common enemy in the face of the Ottoman Empire, on January 21, 1732, the Treaty of Resht was concluded, which stipulated joint military operations against the Ottoman Empire. In addition, the Russian Empire returned to the Safavid state most of the coast of the Caspian Sea. Nader Afshar guaranteed the Russian Empire the right to duty-free trade in Iran. Thus, the Safavid state received back part of the previously lost territories, and the Russian Empire received the income that Peter the Great counted on starting his Persian campaign. On February 17, 1733, Nader Afshar, at the head of an army with a total number of about 100,000 soldiers, invaded the territory of the Ottoman Empire. With a swift march, the army of Nader Afshar reached the outskirts of Baghdad and began the siege of the city. And the Ottoman garrison, which was experiencing huge problems with food, was already planning to capitulate, but at that time news came to Baghdad that an 80,000th Ottoman army led by Topal Osman Pasha was coming to the aid of the garrison. When Nader Afshar found out about the approach of the enemy army, he left part of his forces to continue the siege of Baghdad, and he himself advanced towards Topal Osman Pasha at the head of the 70,000th army. The battle took place on July 19, 1733 near the city of Samarra. Topal Osman Pasha was an experienced commander, so he decided to use a military trick. Having learned about the approach of the army of Nader Afshar, he deliberately weakened the vanguard of his army in order to provoke the enemy into a rash attack. The Ottoman army was formed in such a way that its rear and left flank were protected by the Tigris River, and the right flank of the army rested against the Ottoman camp. Part of the Ottoman cavalry was placed at a distance from the main army in order to deliver a flank attack at the right moment. Having reached the battlefield, Nader Afshar could not correctly assess the size of the enemy forces. Deciding that he was opposed by a small army, although he managed to take advantageous positions, Nader Afshar ordered an attack. The Persian army rapidly attacked the enemy positions. At the same time, Nader Afshar sent part of his cavalry to attack the Ottoman cavalry in order to tie it up in battle and prevent a flank attack. When the Persian army reached the enemy positions, a bloody battle ensued. The weakened avant-garde of the Ottomans, as expected, could not withstand the onslaught of the Persians and began to back away. It seemed that a little more and the Ottoman army would falter and run from the battlefield, but at that moment the Osman Pasha stomped and sent the Janissaries who were in reserve to attack. At this point, the Persian army was tied up in battle, so the attack of the Janissaries came as a complete surprise to her. Under the onslaught of the Janissaries, the infantry of Nader Afshar trembled and began to back away. In turn, the Ottoman army, having thrown the enemy from their positions, went on the offensive. Realizing that the battle was not going the way he planned, Nader Afshar sent his reserve in the form of 12,000 horsemen from the Afghan Abdali tribe to attack, who was supposed to stop the attack of the Janissaries. The Janissaries met the attacking Afghan horsemen with dense rifle fire, so the Afghan horsemen faltered and hastily left the battlefield without reaching the positions of the Janissaries. The Ottoman army continued to pursue the enemy, trying to inflict maximum damage on him. Nevertheless, Nader Afshar managed to leave the battlefield along with the remnants of his army and thus avoided complete defeat. As for the Ottomans, having lifted the siege of Baghdad, they did not pursue the enemy, since they also suffered serious losses in the Battle of Samarra. After the defeat at Samarra, Nader Afshar concentrated his efforts on restoring the army and already in 1734, gathering his forces, he began a campaign in the Caucasus, which was under the rule of the Ottoman Empire. Having reached the outskirts of the city of Ganja, the army of Nader Afshar laid siege to it. The city was defended by a strong Ottoman garrison, which offered fierce resistance, repulsing all assault attempts. The siege of Ganja was delayed due to the competent actions of the garrison, and in order not to waste time in vain, Nader Afshar ordered his army to block the cities of Yerevan and Tiflis. Thus, the Ottomans were forced to act as quickly as possible to lift the siege of important cities before their garrisons surrendered. In 1735, the contradictions between the Russian and Ottoman empires seriously escalated, so it became obvious to everyone that a new war would begin very soon. In turn, the Russian Empire doubted that during the upcoming confrontation with the Ottoman Empire it would be able to protect the western Caspian coast. In addition, she urgently needed an ally in the fight against the Ottoman Empire. Therefore, on March 21, 1735, a new treaty was concluded between the Safavid state and the Russian Empire, according to which the Russian Empire transferred Derbent and Baku to the Safavid state in exchange for additional trade privileges. Also, this agreement assumed a joint struggle with the Ottoman Empire and the refusal to conclude a separate peace treaty with the Ottoman Sultan. Meanwhile, the Ottoman army arrived in the Caucasus, led by Köprülü Pasha, who planned to defeat Nader Afshar and oust him from the territory of the Caucasus. Having received news of the approach of the enemy, Nader Afshar advanced to meet him and set up camp near the city of Yeğeburun. The battle took place on June 19, 1735. The Ottoman army suffered a crushing defeat following a bloody battle, and Nader Afshar was able to establish control over the Caucasus. Despite the fact that Nader Afshar was lucky, having regained control over the previously lost territories of the Safavid state, he decided not to continue the war against the Ottoman Empire and began separate peace negotiations, thereby violating the Treaty of Ganja concluded with the Russian Empire. March 8, 1736, Nader Afshar overthrows Abbas III and proclaims himself the new Shahinshah. And on September 24, he signs a peace treaty under which the Ottoman Empire recognizes the authority of Nader Afshar over the Caucasus, and Afsharid Iran recognizes the authority of the Ottoman Sultan over Baghdad and Mesopotamia. This ended the next Turkish-Persian War. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click on the bell so you don't miss new videos.